That's what
I would say, argue that, it's actually the relatively impoverished nature of Hardwick has actually really worked in its favor for launching all of this stuff, because I think a lot of the sort of safety net that these folks are talking about is a sort of social and cultural response to a community that hasn't really had sort of the luxury of isolating itself from each other with money in a way, if that makes any sense. But I really believe that, it's a lot of this sort of, the interconnectedness that comes of not having, ready access to, lots of cash that actually really makes it work around here. And so I think, Hardwick's got, in a really real sense, Hardwick is tremendously advantaged by its disadvantage.
You almost had to pull together.
Yeah, I really believe that.
But then we have enough communities where you have that hardship without that collective response. So what was it then among you that somehow, what was that other ingredient kind of that helped to, I'm coming back to really your question, Nelson, was there, for example, the business ownership group, is that, so how did that happen? And what is pulling you back in there? So what are some of these different stories?
I think part of it is that we're all very close in age, and on the same age. We're all on the same page, we're all the same age. We all have families, we're all engaging in this high-risk entrepreneurship thing that I think has shared issues with everybody's going through the same thing. And I think that is part of it, is that we're all engaging in our own, but it's very similar action. So what I'm going through is very similar to what everyone else is going through, almost at the same stage. So it brings you together very quickly when you're all working on it and believing. And the second thing would be we all actually believe in all this stuff, and that's part of how we engage in our businesses too. So those things.
We believe in what exactly? This stuff.
Well, we believe that I believe that the work that I'm doing now is someday going to pay off, not only for a profitable business, but how it's going to advance and enhance this community. Because I probably could be doing a few things a little differently if I weren't so interested in how my business is going to impact the community.
I think right here is that, it is that shared belief that the money isn't what is the most important thing. It's nice to have enough to survive, but it's this connection that's bringing you happiness. It's the community that's bringing you happiness. It's not about again, what kind of car you drive or how big your house is or whatever, which is like what most of America's work, going on. We're just more on how can we help each other? And maybe it's just this weird, magnetic forces drawing like-minded people into this area. I don't really get it, but it really is that most people that have ended up here are not here, that they're here because they want this kind of shared communal vision of how we could be together on this planet, how humanity needs to be together on this planet, or there won't be a planet.
A reason for asking the question is obviously the desire to duplicate or imitate. And as I've listened, if I can be a mirror for a minute and reflect back some things, it seems to me that there's less one single factor and more a confluence of things that came together in a way that they actually the timing was right. I've heard the discussion about the structure of government, the town meetings, about the economic hardship and the bleakness of the situation, the size of the place and the tradition, and the age of a certain group of people who came along at the same time. And it seemed to me that heartbeat, if I'm hearing it, and I'm just hearing it for the first time, brought a kind of dimension of community that really wasn't rooted in economics, but recognized it. If all those things kind of came together at about the same time, something beautiful happened. That's as I'm listening to it, because I think sometimes we look for a single factor, and it probably isn't one thing. I think what it says to us is the factors may not be the same in another town, but we have to look for what is there and what's breaking out at a particular moment, and how those things can be value added to each other. Because that's what I've been hearing as I've been listening to you. It's just a way of thinking about it that doesn't really require a single explanation. It's all these things that got together at about the right time, including somebody popping in here from DC. I was thinking, when you come to somewhere else, you automatically think back about your town as you sit here. But, we've been having a problem with youth. And you said that in some sense, poverty became the blessing here. And we've tried to formulate, how can we see gang members and street groups as a resource for safe communities and for community justice, and indeed for building community itself, because the culture sees them as wasted people, and they turn into a little bit of a hunt, and that diminishes the humanity of the whole place. But if you say they are doing the crime and causing the problem, who's best positioned to undo it? If somehow you worked with that in a different way. And I was sitting here thinking that that's an asset in our town. The thing that you call a problem becomes an asset if you can shift your paradigm a little bit. And it was good to hear you say that, because it opened up even more possibilities. And to me, that's the value of being here, is to not so much imitate you step for step, but to grab hold to that something or whatever it is that came together here.
Yeah, and I think the other sort of two pieces that I would add to that are a sense of shared vision, that people are working towards a common end, even if there's some diversity as to exactly what that looks like. I think there's still a sort of a desire to work in this one direction. And then the other piece, which I think is sort of a broader thing that applies as well under any circumstances, is what we've started talking about as coordinated investment. And that, it doesn't make sense. Part of our plan is we're trying to get some investment here, but it doesn't make sense from an agricultural standpoint, if Vermont's trying to bring back the grain industry, it doesn't make sense to provide agricultural extension services up in these counties, and then invest in a mill down in that county way over there, and then start providing technical services to bakers over here. But if we can sort of strategically coordinate investments and really point them in places where they can then have that sort of that exponential growth factor, where they really start leveraging one another outside of the investment, then you've got a much greater return out of the whole thing. I mean, just to what you were saying, I don't know if you ever read any Emma Goldman.
No, I'm familiar with the name.
Yep. Emma Goldman was a great feminist anarchist writer from the last century, and she's got one of my favorite lines of hers is that crime is just misdirected creativity.
I better read that.